call is now being recorded.
Hello. Okay. Can you hear me? Somebody can reply.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. So hopefully today we will not have much problem in internet connectivity. So yesterday actually we have seen some discussion. Some you might have missed discussion, but what I will do, introduction part, I will share the PPT of the same. If possible, I also record myself, okay, and then post to you. So you will not worry about the introduction part which you might have missed yesterday. Factor of safety we'll again discuss because actually we are faced some problem during the discussion only. So factor of safety is very essential thing before starting actually actual numerical on this design part. So factor of safety is sometimes denoted as FS. FS stands for factor of safety. Right. Or sometimes FOS, factor of safety. And some books refer to that N. Okay, so all these three say notations you must know. So factor of safety is a ratio of say failure load divided by ratio of failure load to working load. Failure load means the load at which the component will fail. Now, to what situation we will say fail is depends on what is your perspective. Maybe suppose I will say that yielding point where a little plastic deformation takes place, that may be considered as a failure point. Or somebody will say that I will wait until it breaks completely. That may be my failure point. So failure, which is a failure, that is my perspective, and that is a designer's perspective, which I will call as a failure. So whatever perspective the designer which will have in his or her mind, accordingly the corresponding load at that situation is a failure load. I hope you understand what is meant by failure load. Failure load is what? Somebody will say that whenever a plastic deformation will take place, little deformation will take place, that instant I will say it's a failure. Somebody will say that no, complete breakage I will wait complete till the complete breakage takes place. At that point, I will say it's a failure occurring. So, corresponding to what your perspective is, what your definition, what your understanding is, accordingly, corresponding load is called as a failure load. So, failure load divided by the working load, actual working load. Actual working load will be always less than failure load because you will not load the component up to the failure. So, this ratio is the factor of safety. Alternatively, this is also called as ratio of failure stress to the working stress. So both are the same thing. Factor of safety for ductile material, if it is a material is ductile material. For ductile material, examples you can note: steel is a ductile material, copper is ductile material, aluminum is ductile material. For this, the stress, allowable stress or working stress, you can say working stress is equal to allowable stress. Okay, you will allow the working stress this much only. Okay, accordingly the working stress will be there. So allowable stress or working stress will be equal to, that is generally denoted by sigma. Sigma is equal to SYT by factor of safety. At this point of time, I will make you revise actually because you must be knowing all these things. What is SYT? Suppose if it is say stress strain diagram of mild steel, right? Here up to this point, elastic limit is there. I mean, the stress is directly proportional to strain, and that's why this line, the graph between stress to strain, you will see a straight line. So up to this corresponding point, this is a SYT limit or yield stress limit. And complete breakage if happens, this is a complete breakage point. This will be called as a SVT. So I will say that this is my SYT, this point, and whenever the complete breakage will occur, that will be called as a SUT. YT means yield strength in tension. SUT means ultimate tensile strength. There are complete breakage takes place. So for ductile material, this is my say failure point, SYT. I'll consider for ductile material failure point as the SYT point. So SYT by factor of safety, SYT is a property of material. Please note SYT and SUT, these are all properties of material. They are irrespective of what load you are applying. They are actually properties of material. They are obtained by having some actual laboratory testings. Okay, this is SYT by factor of safety. If it is a material is brittle, for brittle material like cast iron and ceramic, the factor of safety sigma is given by SUT by factor of safety. The reason of this, that this is SYT by factor of safety and this is SUT by factor of safety, the reason is that if you somewhere if you refer the stress strain diagram of a brittle material, this is what I had drawn earlier. This is the stress strain diagram of a ductile material. If you refer somewhere the or in a strength of materials, you must have seen. If you refer the stress strain diagram of a brittle material, actually it starts from say this point and it ends immediately here somewhere. It is a breakage. I mean there is no yielding, there is no plastic deformation. It will directly breaks. So when we say directly breaks, this will not be called as SYT. This will be called as a SUT because it's a ultimate breakage point, ultimate tensile strain. This is okay. If this is not clear, I will rewrite again. This is called as SUT. It means there is no existence of SYT in brittle material. Please note, there is no point which can be called as SYT or yield strength in tension in brittle material because it never yields. It directly breaks. That's why corresponding point will be SUT. So therefore, for brittle material, you will never write, please note, for a brittle material, you will never write sigma is equal to SYT by factor of safety because there is no SYT. Sigma is always equal to SUT by factor of safety in case of brittle material. A very simple identification of ductile and brittle material is that if you can bend that material, if you have a rod of that material, if you can bend it, if it bends, it is a ductile material. If it doesn't bend, it is actually brittle material. Of course, I will not say this way, little modification I will do. When it has got a capacity to bend, it is the property of bending there, then it is ductile material. There is no property of bending, it is a brittle material. So cast iron, even chalk will be a brittle material. So this is the difference between the brittle material and the ductile material and the corresponding equations for say stresses or factor of safety which we have seen just now. How to select a factor of safety? So that will be again a question. Many times if it is a numerical, and then you have to yourself assume some factor of safety. Generally, if you refer some n number of problems, you will come across that factor of safety is somewhere in the range of 1 to 5 in most of the cases. Okay, exceptions are there definitely, but in most cases the factor of safety is in between the range of 1 to 5. Now, so much of a gap is there. 1 to 5 is a very large range. 1 to 5. So how it depends then? Selection of this magnitude of factor of safety depends on number of factors. The very first factor which I find very important, that's why I have written it very first, is effect of failure. You ask question yourself, what happens if it fails? If the answer is very, danger is there, maybe you will incur a huge financial losses or there will be a danger to human life. Suppose, example I am giving, let us say suppose if you are designing a rope, this is a wire rope, okay, and this rope which you are using, this is a rope. This rope you are using in a lift elevator, Okay. Now you know that the entire weight is being carried by this rope in the elevators. So if you are designing the rope, and if you have a problem, some dilemma of selecting the factor of safety in this rope design, what you will ask yourself that what happens if it fails? Now the answer is that if it fails, there can be a danger to the human life, occupants of the lift. So therefore, in such cases, if you understand that if it fails, there will be a very large losses, then factor of safety should be high. Okay. So if effect of failure is very dangerous, then you should consider a very high factor of safety. And in the reverse opposite way, you can say that if there is little inconvenience in the maybe a very small loss in time, very small loss of production, very small loss in overall small loss, then you can consider the very small factor of safety. So this is the one of the guidelines. Then another is the type of load. Which is the load? The load is static, impact, and fluctuating loads. Now we will see this diagram from the static, impact, and fluctuating loads in the in next 1 or 2 slides. So we will not elaborate here this, but it then again depends on this type of load. The load is static means constant throughout the time. The factor of safety can be very small. If it is impact load, I mean you will experience very large load in a very small time, then you will definitely assume a large value of factor of safety. So it also depends on the types of load. Then it depends on the degree of accuracy in force analysis. Because finally, if you are solving some numerical, actually that numerical is some mathematical model of a physical situation. It's of other day, if you are just writing the equation sigma T is equal to force by area, okay, for a rod, you are writing on paper. Actually, it's a physical situation. A rod is there and which is subjected to some tension. But when you assume some forces for the purpose of calculation, whether that force is actually the same force which is experienced by the rod or not, it depends on how much accuracy is your method of measurement. So therefore, degree of accuracy also again important. If you are not sure about the accuracy of the measurement, then it will have some scope of factor of safety. So therefore, if you are very much unsure about the accuracy of the forces, then you will take the high factor of safety, and when you are very accurate that no, the physical situations, the forces in physical situations, and the forces which you are considering in your calculations, if both are reasonably close, then you can take a very small factor of safety. It also depends on the material of the component. If the material of the component is a ductile material, okay, and other case we can say suppose a material is brittle, right? Then in ductile material, the factor of safety can be very small. In brittle material, the factor of safety is very large. The reason is that again, we can go to the corresponding stress strain diagram. The stress strain diagram of a ductile material is this way. That's why what this means, it means that before actual breakage, before actual breaking point, there is a indication that it will fail. Indication in what? Indication in terms of plastic deformation. What is plastic deformation? That deformation, when the force is removed, will not regain its shape. Okay, that is a plastic deformation. So from this point onward, plastic deformation will take place. So this is a sort of indication, some warning to you before breaking point. So therefore, there is a scope to have some warning, there is a scope to have some corrective action, and therefore you can afford to have a very small factor of safety. Whereas in case of brittle material, as we know now that it suddenly breaks, there is no yielding, there is no plastic deformation, and therefore there is no warning. If there is no warning, then definitely you will not take a risk. So what do you do? You take a high factor of safety. So these are all some situations where the factor of safety is dependent on. The factor of safety is also dependent on, or it will also take into account some of the uncertainties in the magnitude of external force. Just like we mentioned, this point actually we mentioned in earlier also, that if you are not sure about the magnitude of external force which you are modeling in your calculation, then you take a high factor of safety. So that's why your factor of safety will take into account these things also. It will also take into account the variation in the property of materials. Because see, suppose there is say some steel material, right? Some steel material, and you are using some data that SYT is equal to suppose 320 Newton per mm square. Now, where from this data come? The data comes from some actual testing. Now, actual testing is done on some sample specimen. Your material will be little different than the sample specimen, though the name of material is same. There can be little variation in the properties of material, right? That's why if you and because of the variation in properties of material, definitely the SYT also will change in actual cases. So it will, so your factor of safety also will take into account the variations in properties of materials. Then variations in dimensions of component due to imperfect workmanship. You are saying that dimensions are so and so, but actual dimensions are not so and so in actual cases. You are when you are doing some calculations, you are saying that diameter of the shaft is equal to 10 mm, right? Actually, diameter of shaft may be equal to 9.8 mm, right? This is all because of some manufacturing errors. So this error will, and if suppose the diameter is small, then the corresponding stresses will be more, and that is why to take into account the these variations in dimensions, you can use the factor of safety. And there are some simplifications. We do a lot of simplifications while doing some calculations. We assume lot of assumptions are there in our theory. Whenever we use some equations, that equation itself is derived on certain assumptions. So all these will take into account by the factor of safety. This is the importance of factor of safety. A guideline is that if you ask me the guideline of the factor of safety, generally if material is a ductile material, and force is a static force, that means it is constant throughout the time, the factor of safety is somewhere in between 1.5 to 2. This is one guideline. If the force is not static and material is brittle, if say material is brittle, force is either static or the force is say some impact or some fluctuating, then the factor of safety is high. So maybe in between a range of 3 to 5. Okay, so this is some guideline while selecting the factor of safety. Is it all right so far? Correct. I mean, there is any lag today, which you experienced yesterday? Somebody can reply. It is going very smoothly today.
No, sir.
No. Still
Yes,
some
sir.
problem are there. Are there some problems in listening?
No, sir. Today it is okay. It is perfect.
No, sir. No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, so I am trying my best. If there are any problem, I'm putting the form attendance form. You can very frankly write your opinion there. No? There's no need at all to say any good thing. Whatever bad thing you can talk, I welcome all. Okay, so whatever. So we are trying to give the best, and hopefully you are also trying your best to accept this. So this factor, an application factor, actually we have seen yesterday, but to revise this, it's in some cases, particularly during starting and stopping of some machines, there is a experience of large load, large torque, large force. To take into account this, we have to use some service factors. So this will be more elaborated when we actually use the service factors in some numericals. Then the types of load actually we are seeing, but now here I can draw some sketches for this. Static load, if it is static load, then this will be say, suppose some time is there, this is some time, this is some load is say suppose E, and the force is, no, force is same throughout the life cycle of the component. This is a static load. Fluctuating load is this way. There are two variations of fluctuating load. Fluctuating load can be, I can draw fluctuating load as this one, this way. It means that from zero level it is going to some higher value, and again from this lower value. This is a fluctuating load. Or it is not actually passing to zero. You can have this be also fluctuating load. This way. The point is that with respect to time, the force value is not same throughout the life cycle. That is a fluctuating load. Let me tell you at this point, fluctuating load is little dangerous as compared to static load. Suppose for example, if static load is, let us say suppose this is some cantilever beam, okay? And if I place one load here, say load is 10 kilonewton, and if I say that load is static, it means it is not changing the value or not the direction. And whereas if you think the other load, other case say same cantilever beam, right? But I'll say here plus minus 10 kilonewton. What does this mean? Plus minus mean at some time it is going maximum to 10, this way suppose maximum to 10, and again minus 10. So that load is fluctuating in this way. This is a fluctuating load, right? So this case is more dangerous, even though magnitudes are same, because the components fail earlier in case of fluctuating loads. So you have to take very extra care in case of fluctuating load. There is one chapter completely devoted on the fluctuating load that we can understand later on about the fluctuating load in details. And impact load is what? Just like hammer. Impact load, name itself suggests hammer, sort of. There is a very high value of load and a very short duration of time. This duration is very small. This is the impact load. So these are various types of loads. We have to understand the type of load in your application. Then before starting some numericals actually on the stress, strain, and the atrocity, etc., I want to revise stress and strain. What is stress? Simple. When a mechanical component is subjected to an external force, a resisting force is developed. So stress is always a resisting force is developed in a material or in a component. So that internal resisting force per unit area of the component is called as a stress. This is actually, I did not mention more and more again and again, because this is all a strength of material, and you very well understand the strength of material in the previous class. So internal resisting force per unit area of the component is called as a stress. Whereas the strain is deformation per unit length. It is given by this, I don't know whether you can see this or not, it is denoted by epsilon. Epsilon is equal to change in the length divided by the original length is the strain. So this is stress and strain, some definition which you can revise. Important thing is now types of stresses, because actually to start a good design, you should first understand what are the various types of stresses acting in a component. If you can understand these types of stresses, half part is done in a design process. Remaining half part is only to write the corresponding equations and get the answers. So before calculating, you must identify the types of stresses. Some of which are very easy to identify in some components, some of them are difficult. Tensile stresses, very simple. Example is what? Very simple. This is a small bar subjected to some axial tensile force P. What this fiber, no, if I this fiber, so this is a XX cross section. What cross section XX will experience? It will experience some internal resistance. That is a stress. That stress is given by, generally it is denoted by sigma T is equal to force divided by cross sectional area. Very simple. This is sigma T is equal to, sigma T is now tensile stress. Each fiber means what? If I draw a side view of this bar, it will be a circle, and various fiber in axial directions will be seen as some points. These are some fibers seen as points from side view. All these fiber will experience the same amount of stress, that is the tensile stress. Compressive stress is opposite to it. Okay, no need to mention, but still I will draw compressive stress. This is what simple compressive stress. This again force. Again, if you think of some XX cross section, it will experience some amount of stress, generally denoted by sigma C. Compressive stress is equal to again force by area, right? And sigma C is equal to compressive stress. So this is something very similar to tensile stress. And actually, these are very easy to identify, these type of stresses. Next is the crushing stress, very important stress, and you must identify where its crushing is. Crushing stress is very similar to, please note, it's very similar to compressive stress. Very similar to compressive stress. But what is the difference? Difference is that, you see now what figure I am drawing. Let us say, suppose this is one, say some plate. This is one plate. And now I have some rod, maybe think of a chalk, and I am pressing this chalk against this plate. What will happen if I press it? Press means what? I am giving the force in the direction. This is a rigid body. This is, say, a fixed component. What will happen if you just visualize this situation? There will be a rupture of the surface. Now, rupture of either this as, say, A material and this as, say, B material. I am talking about two different materials. A is one material, B is another material. Now, if I press this component against the surface of the A, what will happen? This surface of the will rupture. Now, which surface will rupture first? It depends on the strength of the individual material. If the strength of A is less, A material will rupture. If the strength of B is less, B material will rupture. Are you getting this? This is called as a crushing stress. Crushing always happens between two dissimilar metals along the surface, not internal stresses, along the surface. But the phenomena is very much similar to compression. Actually, what you are doing, you are compressing this B rod against the wall of A material. That's why, in that sense, it is similar to compression. But crushing is between two dissimilar metals, and especially happens on the surface. That surface will rupture first, which is weaker in comparison. That is a crushing stress. Again, if you want to write the equation will be simple then. Sigma C is equal to force by area. Okay. Now again, this equation is applicable only to that which is weaker material, because that is going to fail. Weaker is going to fail. That's why you will apply this equation to weaker material. So that is a crushing stress. Many students do not understand the difference between crushing and compression. So I am clarifying here what is crushing and what is compression. Bending stress. Bending stress is what? Maybe suppose again, if I take a simple example of, say, this one, subjected to some, this is a cantilever beam, that is one end is fixed, other end is free, and subjected to some load at the free end. And in such cases, you must have found in strength of material the bending moment diagram. You know that bending moment, no, you can find out the bending moment, and the bending moment value is different from at different locations. If suppose this is some value x, this is some force P, you will say that bending moment, say bending moment MB, where this is say XX location, at the XX location, bending moment is equal to P into X. If suppose if you get some different location, you have suppose some here Y, then at Y location it will be equal to P into Y. So bending moment will be there. Essentially, bending moment, existence of bending moment will be there. That fiber will explain the bending stress. The value of bending stress, here I will somewhere write it. The value of bending stress is found by the equation which you are again familiar with. One equation which you just try to remember, this equation which you have seen earlier, this is M upon I is equal to sigma upon Y. This equation is also called as a flexural formula or bending equation. This is actually a bending stress, sigma B for bending. So therefore, if I want to find out the tensile stress, I will write equation P by A. If I want to find out the equation of sigma C, that is crushing stress, or sorry, compressive stress, I will write equation P by A. If I want to find out a bending stress, then I will write equation bending stress is equal to M upon Y and into this, sorry, M upon Y into this Y. This is my equation for the bending stress. I hope you understand this. And one more thing actually, let me suppose we are talking about bending stress. Okay, here I will again have some discussion on bending stress. Bending stress is, suppose if it bends like this, there was one rod, and rod now bends this way. What will happen? Because of this bending, this external fiber, the outer with respect to the radius of curvature or point center of curvature. With respect to that, this is outer. So outer fiber is subjected to sigma T because this will elongate. Whereas the inner fiber will experience the compressive stress. This together, sigma T and sigma C, actually is called as bending stress. Bending stress is not anything different than tensile and crushing, tensile and compressive. Bending consists of tensile and compression only. But all fibers are not subjected to same amount of stress. This fiber is subjected to tensile, this fiber is subjected to compression. And if you suppose draw a side view of this, it will be a circle. You see that side view of this fiber which corresponds to this outer fiber. I will label this. This is outer fiber A, this is inner fiber say B. Corresponding, this is outer fiber A, this is inner fiber B. So outer fiber is subjected to some amount of stress. This is now sigma D. And inner fiber will be subjected to some compressive stress. But again, magnitude is same. Magnitude is same. This is now sigma C. And this fiber will be subjected to no stress. And then if I join this way, I'll again draw this for a better understanding. This is that cross section. This is that A fiber. This is that B fiber. This point is subjected to some tensile stress. This fiber is subjected to some compressive stress. You can just note values of these are same. Sigma T in magnitude is equal to sigma C in magnitude, though the direction is different. And this is a fiber which will not experience any stress, which you popularly know called as neutral axis. This is all you know, neutral axis. And then you join this, it will pass through this way. What does this means? That this fiber is subjected to this amount of stress, whereas if you see this fiber is subjected to some low value of stress. This fiber is subjected to again some small value of stress, and this fiber is subjected to no stress. Similarly, this way. This is smaller value of compression, no compression. So some fibers are subjected to sigma T. Again, magnitudes of all fibers are not same. Sigma C, some fibers are subjected to sigma C. Again, magnitudes of all fibers are not same. This is nothing but a bending. This is called as a bending stress. And as I told you, this bending stress is equal to M upon I into Y. What bending stress you get it? You get bending stress equal to this bending stress, that is maximum bending stress. Because we are interested in most of the times in finding out the maximum bending stress. So this is how to find out the bending stress. So I hope I made it clear the bending stress, crushing stress, etc. Then other stresses, direct shear stress. Direct shear stress means what? Say suppose this way. This is this way. So this will have a shear. A best example you can just know is suppose there are two plates and two plates are riveted. Okay. Now if suppose two plates are riveted, the rivet will look like this. Okay. Now after some deformation, if suppose two plates are say moved in two different directions, it will result into the failure of this failure of this rivet. It may look like, whether you can see this, something like this. This way. Can you see this? This is a failure of this rivet, and this failure is because of this direct shear stress. Direct shear stress, just note that there is a sliding of two planes, plane. So essentially, this is the way to recognize the shear stress. There will be a sliding of the two planes. You can see this is sliding of the two planes here. This is a direct shear stress. Again, if you want to find out the value, then it will be equal to direct shear stress is generally denoted by tau is equal to the force divided by cross-sectional area. So here in this example, A stands for pi by 4 d square, where d is the diameter of this rivet. So this is called as a direct shear stress. There is some difference between the direct shear stress and the torsional shear stress. Notations are same, but the difference, what difference is? Suppose there is one shaft, right, and subjected to some torque, not twisting. That's a twisting. This is not bending. This is twisting. If it is twisted, then what will happen? Each fiber will experience some different amount of TCC. I'm again drawing. Suppose I'm drawing here this side view of this rod. This is the side view of the rod. See, I'm not very habitual of writing this with this. No, there is one tablet. I'm using one hardware for this writing. It takes some time to become habitual with this writing on the pad. Okay, so this is say fibers. These are all fibers of the shaft. So you can see that whenever torsion takes place, this fiber is subjected to some value of stress, and this fiber is subjected to some zero value of stress. This way. So internal fiber, again neutral fiber, you can say internal fiber is not subjected to any type of stress. So this stress, twisting is again what? See, shear word is associated with sliding of two planes. Here you can just noted sliding of two planes. Here if you see, that two planes, just think, actually, if it is a physical situation, if I would have been in class, I would have explained it in a better way. But just try to understand. Think of one plane here, and think of another plane which is very near to it. Even whatever distance I have shown is very exaggerated, very near to it, very small, microns level. Those two planes, if you see, they will have some sliding motion because twisting is there. So therefore, this twisting, the corresponding stresses developed in this type of physical situation is again equal to tau, but the equation is not equal to P by A. That equation is obtained by this way. Another equation which you to get this tau, I write first equation which again you are familiar with, I think, is equal to T upon J is equal to some tau by R is equal to C theta by L or G theta by L, sometimes C, sometimes G. This way, you are familiar with this equation. This is a torsional rigidity equation. So this is that torsional shear stress, because this stress is induced because of torsion, not because of direct force P. So if I extract this part only, it becomes T by J is equal to tau by R. So therefore, this tau is equal to T by J into R. What is T? T is the torsional, which you are torsional strain, torsional load, torsion, twisting moment, torque. These are all same things. Torsion value, and J is called as a polar moment of inertia. Okay, we'll see what is polar moment of inertia and what are the equations of polar moment of inertia, and then we solve actually some numericals. So T by J into R. R is the radius of this. So if I put the radius equal to, suppose this diameter, say in this numerical, say radius is equal to 20 mm. If I put radius equal to 20 mm, this torsional shear stress will be experienced by this fiber. If I take somewhere here this fiber, where R is equal to not 10, R is equal to 10, R is not equal to 20, R is 10. If I put R 10, then you will get another answer, but that will be a torsional shear stress experienced by this fiber, which is located at a distance of 10 mm from the center. So you can have you can find out the torsional shear stress at as many locations as you want. Definitely, we are generally interested in getting the maximum torque, maximum stress. That's why we use R is equal to 20 in most of the cases. That is R is equal to maximum radius in most of the cases. So this is the meaning of the torsional shear stress. So it is very important to understand the difference between direct shear stress and the torsional shear stress, right? So I'll remove this again. Then bearing pressure. Bearing pressure, again difficult to identify. Sometimes people get confused about this bearing pressure. What is bearing pressure? Suppose, let us say, just think that there's one disc, there's one disc, say, this is one disc. Yes, okay. There's one disc, and think of another disc, two discs. Place one over the other, two discs. Let us say two situations we'll consider. One situation, these two are not rotating, two are stationary, but are compressed. So what will be the view if I draw? This is one plate, and over it will be another plate in one of the views, and they are compressed. If there are two different materials, then the stress experienced by these is called as a crushing stress, because we have seen that two dissimilar metals press against one another, the surface will rupture. This will be a crushing. But if now these rotates, one is say fixed and one is rotates. This is simple situation of bearing. This is a simple bearing model. One rotates. When one rotates, then whatever pressure, whatever space experience here is not called as crushing. It is called actually a bearing. So bearing means similar to crushing, but in crushing, rotation is not taking place, or relative motion between two components will not take place in crushing, whereas in bearing, two plates are pressed together, but one of the components will be rotating or moving. That means there is some relative motion between the two plates which are pressed against each other. So that is called as the pressure experienced by these. The pressure word is not stress word is used, pressure word is used here because whenever we come across with these situations, we always put some oil here. We always put some lubricant here. Okay, lubricants may be solid lubricants, maybe a liquid lubricant, but lubricants we place. And whenever we place lubricants, particularly liquid lubricants, then that liquid is subjected to some amount of pressure, and that's why the word is pressure used here. Bearing. Better you can call it bearing stress, but bearing stress is not a very popular word. Bearing pressure is popular word because bearing. Whenever you talk about bearing, definitely liquid lubricants will be clear over there. That's why that liquid will be subjected to some amount of stress, some amount of pressure. That's why the name is bearing pressure. But this is very much similar to the crushing phenomena. In crushing, no relative motion takes place, whereas in bearing, the relative motion will take place. This is about the bearing. And of course, if you want to find out equation is very simple again. It will be equal to say some bearing pressure is equal to some force divided by some cross-sectional area which is in contact with the another plate. This is bearing pressure. Contact stresses is little say advanced topic actually. Whenever advanced strength of material subject is taught, the contact stresses are discussed, because there are some derivations, some assumptions are there in contact stresses. So we will not much demonstrate or use, or we come across contact stresses in our course. But let me tell you what contact stress examples. Say two gears. When the two gears meshing takes place, okay, at a very fraction of time, the two gears are in contact, and that also very high with high load. Okay, that is called as the stress experienced in the vicinity of that contact is called as a contact stresses. Okay, and there is one special theory, Hertz theory, to establish the equation of the contact stresses. So we'll not talk much about contact stress, but let me tell you that examples are the stresses experienced at the point of contact in the gears, or in cam and follower. Okay, or in bearings, ball and bearings, when the balls are having very small contact with the inner or outer races, that is also contact stresses. So contact stresses are little advanced topic in the strength of material. So this is the various types of stresses. Okay, I again repeat, very important thing is that if in your problem, if you can understand the types of stresses, the half part is already done. You understand half part it means. Remaining half part is only to write the corresponding equation which we are seeing so far and get the answer. This is really, this way we will go through the entire course. Attendance actually I have given already. So there are three methods we'll be adopting attendance. There is one special extension also, Google extensions, whereby I can note your login time and logout time of the meet. Accordingly, also your attendance will be judged. Okay, so Google Form link I have already sent to you. Sometimes I also may send you Google Sheet, in which directly you can write A or P, absent or present. Okay, this we can do. So you got the today's link. Everybody, please, somebody can reply.
No, sir.
Link, you did not get link.
No, sir, we haven't got the link yet.
No, sir.
Okay, I will again share it. No problem.
No, sir.
No, it's okay. I will share the link. I will share the link just now. This is that link, attendance link. You fill your attendance there.
Excuse me, sir.
You got it?
Sir, the link which you have shared, it shows that we have already recorded the response.
Uh,
So we need a new link, I guess.
okay. Okay. Just wait for 1 minute only. Okay. I'll give in another 1 minute. I can give you the link. This link just now I sent, ending with XY9. Somebody can try and give me reply whether this works or not.
Yes,
Yes,
sir,
sir,
it
this
is
is working.
working.
Okay. Okay. All right. So it is almost 12 o'clock. I hope yesterday, particularly printing students, you try to understand. Yesterday there was some problem. It was your first lecture and had some experience, bad experience. So today it was better as compared to yesterday.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much, and we hopefully we will continue with this. And if there are any problem, you can contact me through mail, through WhatsApp, whatsoever, and I will try my best to reach to you with your queries, with your answers. So those who have filled the form, we can leave.